Hey everybody, Jared from Smart Group Training here, and I'm with my partner Steve Long. We're taking you through a seven-part series tied into the FMS. So this is what we call our red to green series. This is tying in each one of the 7 movement screens that you're going to see on the functional movement screen, the FMS, and we're going to take you from when somebody is dysfunctional, so that's what we consider to be a score of a 1. And we're going to take you from that score of a 1 up into hopefully symmetrical 2s, 3s. Our goal isn't to get to a 3, but we at least want to make sure that we're at symmetrical 2s so we can train safely and effectively, not stacking fitness on top of a dysfunction. So I've got a continuum that we like to look at here whenever we look at our FMS. So our continuum is starting down here with mobility, and it takes you all the way through different forms of stability up into where we start to integrate that into functional movement. So whenever we actually start to see what we like, we want to start to strengthen what we like. We don't want to stack fitness on dysfunction. We want to make sure we go through each one of these phases so we can make sure we're not training somebody in an area that they're dysfunctional and they're basically just going to cause more harm than good. So if you look at our continuum here, we've got 4 different phases. This keeps it kind of simple, that we want to take somebody through. So if we see a 1 on the screen, we want to make sure there's no mobility restriction. If we see a mobility restriction, basically the body can't get into the position that we're looking for. So that's where we need to start. If we're trying to start here on strength and power and they don't have the mobility to get there, we're just trying to, pound a square peg through a round hole. We want to make sure that we work on our mobility, we start to stabilize, and take it through functional movement. So I'm going to hand the reins over to Steve here. He's going to take me through our straight leg raise. So this is our hip hinging pattern, which ties into our active straight leg raise. We're going to start with straight leg raise, and each week we're going to pump out another video working the FMS hierarchy. FMS hierarchy is just taking you from straight leg raise to the deep squat. So if you follow this series week by week, you're going to go from straight leg raise to shoulder mobility all the way up to the deep squat. So we're going to take you through that 7 weeks. So Steve, why don't you go ahead and take me through our first, whenever I'm red lighted here with our hip hinge, our active straight leg raise, take me all the way through what it's actually going to look like from red to green.
Sounds good. Okay, the first thing we want to work on the active straight leg raise pattern is getting the necessary mobility for quality hip extension. So we're starting here on the red light section with P&F hamstring stretches and the half kneeling hip flexor stretch to try to get some hip extension, assuming Jared is a 1. So first thing we're going to do is just go ahead and have Jared lay down on his back, supine position. And we're doing your basic, manual stretches here. Whatever hamstring stretch will be fine. You just want to make sure that the leg is locked out nice and straight. And then when we lift that leg up, we want to make sure that this foot doesn't roll out. So we want to block that, keep it nice and straight, and make sure that you're keeping it straight here from the hip and not just the ankle. So we'll block out that hip here. We're just going to get Jared into where we feel a little bit of tension, and then we're just going to have him push down into my hand for about 3 to 5 seconds, then release. And then we're just going to get a little bit more range out of that with the contract relax. Go ahead and do that again, Jared. Just push your heel down into my hand and release. And then we got a little bit more range again. So this is where we're going to start. Another good mobility exercise is going to be the half kneeling hip flexor stretch. So let's have Jared take a half kneeling position. And with every half kneeling exercise, a good 90-90 position is essential. So we want to make sure that his knee is right underneath his hip. Good. His ankle is right underneath his front knee, and he's a nice straight line from that knee all the way up to the top of his head through his ear. So first thing we're going to do is cue him to get nice and tall. That could be a good enough cue to get a good stretch out of someone from there. To take it to the next level, we'll have him squeeze that glute. That contraction is going to straighten out that hip. You might get a good hip flexor stretch out of that. And from there, we might just do some little pulses forward with some good exhales each time to really attack that hip flexor. We just want to make sure that when we're doing these pulses, we're keeping that back glute nice and tight, or at least we're keeping the pelvis neutral, and we're not going into lumbar extension when we're doing it. So that's the half kneeling hip flexor stretch. From there, we're going to take it into some static stability. So once again, we're going to have Jared start supine, and we're going to have him go with leg lowering 1. So this is the foundational stability exercise for this pattern. We have him supine, and we're just going to work that hip extension pattern. So we're going to have Jared, basically, he's holding this foot up with a band. Now this could be a doorway, this could just be my hand, a tall box, or a table, whatever you need to do just to make sure this leg stays up and is supported. And then we're just going to work stability through the hips, and a little mobility here, by dropping that leg straight down. We're looking to keep the train track with his feet. So from here, I see nice parallel lines with those feet, and I want those parallel lines to stay the entire time he's dropping that leg down. If he gets to a point where that foot starts to kick out, or this foot starts to kick out, that's his range. We just want to work the ranges in a good pattern. We don't want to be reinforcing a bad pattern, so we're just going to basically have Jared go through the clean movement, and then over time, and time could be 5 minutes, time could be 5 weeks. It really depends on the client and the skill set of the trainers to make that happen. But over time, he's going to get a nice, clean, active straight leg raise pattern from there, and then we're going to bring him into some dynamic stability. So the dynamic stability exercise we're going to choose today is going to be the stick hip hinge. So we're starting to pattern the hip hinge. Now that we've got some good mobility, we got some basic stability on the ground, we want to get him up on his feet and have him learn that pattern by using the stick as some proprioceptive feedback and just some feedback overall to let him know where he's at. So the stick is going to be on his butt, his back, and the back of his head with a neutral chin. And then all we're going to have Jared do is work on his hip hinge pattern by pushing his butt back into space and keeping those 3 points of contact on the stick. Really, there's not a whole lot of cueing that you're going to have to do as long as you tell them to maintain those 3 points of contact on the stick, because that's really going to take care of a lot of the coaching for you. So just as long as they're getting their weight back, the weight's transferring to their heels, their center of gravity is back, they're using their glutes and their hips to drive up to the top, then we got a really good start. And we'll have them work that pattern for as long as we need to until we take the stick away. And then once we know that we have a good pattern without the stick, we're going to go ahead and load it up. So we're going to go into the kettlebell RDL. Go ahead and grab a kettlebell and start with the kettlebell between your feet. We want the kettlebell kind of back into almost close to the heels. So you really have to reach back and get your hips back to grab it. If it's out in front of you too far, you're just going to bend over and use a lot of back to stand up, and that's not ideal. So have the kettlebell between the heels to teach a real good hip hinge pattern. And then we're just going to work the kettlebell RDL. So same things with the stick. So it should look exactly the same if I put this stick on him. So go ahead and knock it out. He's not controlling the stick anymore with his hands. He's controlling with his posture. It looks good. We got a nice starter load for Jared, and then we can work that up into double kettlebells, barbell, whatever. But for the sake of transferring into power, we're going to show you the kettlebell swing. Once they have that RDL perfect and they lifted a respectable weight, we can go ahead and make this dynamic, and we're going to go with the swing. So now you're going to start with the kettlebell out in front of you because we're going to hike it back. So same thing as the RDL, it's just really dynamic. So Jared's in a good position. A couple of cues, we want to make sure this back is nice and flat in the starting position, and we're going to have him break the handles. Like he's trying to break the handle in half to kind of get those shoulders down and engage those lats. So now he's in a good starting position. He's just going to hike it back and explode to the front position. And this is all hips. These arms are just a connection between the kettlebell and his torso, and the hips are doing all the action. A couple good cues to just think about on the swing is that you're not going to hip hinge until the last second. You want that kettlebell to almost hit you in the groin before you bend over, and then you're going to use all the glutes and hips to thrust forward. So that's the kettlebell swing. So that is a really good example of some exercises that we regularly use. Now, a lot of times we might substitute this for some other things depending on the client. So no, this isn't a set in stone rule. This is just a really accurate guide to help you bring someone from a 1 on the functional movement screen on the active straight leg raise all the way into some dynamic power like the kettlebell swing. And we'll have the shoulder mobility for you next time, next week. We look forward to seeing you then.